Wait. Doesn't he have to go through a membership class first and do a certain process and say a certain thing and believe the right thing and answer some questions and pinky swear?
And remain a part of the community.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many rules that we have around baptism.
Welcome back. Another episode of The Word Made Fresh. Reverend Jim, Reverend Adriene. Same clothes as last week because we filmed it the same day. You're learning all our secrets. Great to still be here with you.
Yes.
You are back in the pulpit. It's been a minute since you've been in the pulpit. You were there Easter, and then you let me step into it, tell some jokes.
Thank you so much. It was great.
It was a blast. It was a blast. And then Reverend Tim brought the older adults' voices and stories, and now here we are, the second week of May already, and you are back.
And I am back. And I'm so grateful to my colleagues for preaching. This has just been a really tough year because both my parents died. Many of you know that. So having the freedom, both from my colleagues, the church council, the congregation, to be a little more flexible with how often I'm in the pulpit has been a huge help. I'm not sure how I would have made it without having a little more space and breathing room this year. So it's been great, and we've got an amazing, bench of preachers. So that's also just got me thinking about how we will do preaching together over the next year, because I like to hear sermons too. So yeah, we're going to be figuring that out, but I appreciated the diversity of voices.
Yeah, I do want to point out these last two Sundays, you are still here.
Yep.
It's not like you just hand over the pulpit on Sundays when you're out of the building.
Right.
You just give yourself a little bit of I don't have to write a sermon right
That's
now.
right. That's
And
right.
that's space that a senior minister needs, which is a good note for all you other senior ministers out there. Listen to your other colleagues preach. It means a lot when you're sitting there in the room.
It means a lot. But it also has allowed me to do other things that I need to lean into on behalf of the church. So I was at the United Nations one week arguing for an 18th Sustainable Development Goal. So not having, again, as you said, to have to think about a sermon, but being able to study that history and legislation and be able to go and visit the ministry of the Democratic Republic of Congo and to be present with the Baptist World Alliance, and that way that was really important. I'm able to meet with our interfaith colleagues at Jewish Theological Seminary, Union Theological Seminary. I'm able to hang out with some members and actually have some bandwidth to listen to people's stories. Reverend Tim and I are officiating 2 funerals this Saturday. We've had a lot of deaths in our community in the last 4 to 6 weeks. And so again, to have that mental space to be with our members as they are going through these very heavy and serious life transitions, and to know that the pulpit is taken care of is such a gift, such a gift.
Well, we've had a lot of fun. I know I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we are glad to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
You are a good, constant voice for us all to just
Thank you. I appreciate
order ourselves around.
I appreciate it.
So you're in the book of Acts.
Yes.
We're, I think, chapter 9, if my memory serves correct.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Phillip is going running.
Right.
That's what happens here. He chases a chariot.
That's a good sermon title. That coming from you, it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. He does.
Yeah.
He does.
What's going on in this story, and how are you kind of holding it?
Right. So, Philip is on a wilderness road, and this is a little detail that I have missed. But he was in Samaria, right? If I'm not mistaken, and is told
Yep,
to
Philip
get,
preaches in Samaria.
Yeah, is told to get on this road, and it's interesting that this road is going to Gaza. And I'm trying to figure out
There's a lot
what
there.
to do with that. And it's a wilderness road. So meaning he's come from a city where there's lots of people, there's lots of hubbub, there's lots of conversation, there's lots of noise. And then there's the suggestion that he's now on this quiet road, this lonely road. And he encounters this Ethiopian eunuch who is reading from Isaiah. It is not atypical in this time period, as I understand it, that when people would read, they would read out loud. So the suggestion is that as Philip approaches the chariot, he would hear the Ethiopian eunuch reading, and it's about the lambs being brought to slaughter.
Sheep, he was led to the slaughter like a lamb silent before its shearers. And he's like, about whom, may I ask, does your prophet say this? About himself or about someone else?
Yes, yes. So it's a very sensory text. because you're imagining that someone is reading out loud. The Ethiopian eunuch probably has an accent, and so it might make sense that Philip would say, "Hey, do you get that? Are you understanding what you're reading? Can I help?" I think the part that I love the most about this text is is there anything to prevent me from being baptized? And of course, Philip's like, no. Right? So we have
Wait. Doesn't he have to go through a membership class first and do a certain process and say a certain thing and believe the right thing and answer some questions and pinky swear
and remain a part of the community?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many rules that we have around baptism. And, one of the reasons that we baptize children is because of this text.
Yeah.
Because, no, there is nothing to prevent you from being baptized. And I think we saw that so beautifully on Easter Sunday when one of our little ones, Joya, was baptized, and she was in the water and she just was like, "I promise." And it was so beautiful and pure and nothing, right?
Yep.
She was ready to go, and we had a conversation with her, but that sort of eagerness and desire to be close to Jesus is all that's needed.
Yeah.
And I think that's what there's a sentence that says, it doesn't say, "Do you believe?" I think it says, "Do you trust?" Do you trust Jesus? And that's where I was talking about the trust falls.
Oh.
Because it's like this notion of falling into trust on this wilderness road. I'm playing with the idea, and it picks up on something Reverend Tim said last week, that in these low moments, wilderness roads, Samaria to Gaza, very often is when we find ourselves better able to trust.
Yeah.
When there's nothing else to hold on to but Jesus.
Yeah.
But our faith. When the war is raging around, or democracy is under attack, or your child is in the hospital and they have a 50-50 chance of living, there's nothing but to fall into what your grandma and your mom and your parents have taught you. And I think the space between us and the holy gets very narrow, and you feel something, and it's generally in those wilderness road, lonely places, I find.
Ooh. You just took a line from this text and the story from this, and you just unraveled it for any moment in life and history, which is what a good sermon can do.
Right. And then I think if you are in that place, and I think about the eunuch also. So he has been, as we know, castrated. And history would say that, and I didn't know this, I was listening to a commentary, men closest to the throne, like closest in line to the throne, were generally the ones they would castrate.
Yeah.
Partly to keep them from competing, but also they could trust them because they understood the importance, but they were never going to be able to ascend because they couldn't have heirs after that. But there's this notion, a commentator said, where despite the label, because the text just keeps saying the eunuch, the eunuch, the eunuch, Will Gaffney gives him a name. I think there's another person who gives him a name, and I'm going to use that name because they would leave us to believe that the only thing that's important about this man is the fact that he is castrated. And our society does that, right? That the only label is that you're black, or you're a woman, or you're gay, or you're a child. We shouldn't have to count you. You don't count. You don't matter. And what this text does with the baptism is say that the only identity that matters is your child of Godness, and that God takes the people who have been castrated by the world in all the ways that the world or the empire does, and gives them value and gives them worth. And I think that is a really powerful message as well.
Especially when certain identities just put you in a certain category to be fired from your job by the president or viewed however from society. God isn't saying we're eliminating the identities you hold. It's not like, black woman is no longer an identity, but it's saying that your essence, your beingness is still held by God, no matter how society might push or marginalize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on this wilderness road to Gaza, I just have to look at the camera and say, it also forces us to consider our Palestinian siblings. Again, not to discount our Israeli and Jewish siblings, but in this moment when Palestinians have been pushed to the side, and I heard an influencer say, you can yell about Congo and you can yell about Sudan and no one is going to say anything. But if you whisper about Palestine, you're a horrible person, right? And so we have to, on this road to Gaza, talk about the child of Godness of our Palestinian siblings. We just have to. And not in a whisper, as loudly and as bodily and full-throatedly as we can.
So that's this Sunday.
That's this Sunday. That's this Sunday.
Oh,
And this is the early church, right?
yeah, they're just
What is to prevent you?
yeah, they don't have like the rules, and that's one thing I love too. You pointed that out
Yes.
earlier. I forget where I've heard this from, but there's this sense that you go from a movement to a machine to a monument. So there's like what starts as this energy of like we're just getting started, and then you build some structure to maintain it. It's not a bad thing. So it becomes a machine. But if you don't watch out, it's going to just turn into a monument where you're doing things because this is the way you do it, or you
Right.
literally build statues that you're in the
Right.
shadow of. No commentary on churches that have done that, but I know some. But what does it mean to always go from movement to machine to support it, but always back to the movement? So you
Yeah.
have that loop. And this is definitely movement moment
Right.
in Acts, where there are no rules. There's no one saying, well, you got to do this. It's like, what's stopping you? I guess the chariot's going too fast. We just got to stop the chariot and then we can go in the
Find
water.
some water, right? And it also, I think, harkens back to Reverend Tim's comments last week about the first time they were called Christians.
Yeah.
And Christian was understood as those who belong to Christ. And that is such a far distance from how we understand
Yeah.
Christians today. And what we associate with Christians today is so far from simply those who belong to Christ or those who are longing to be baptized, and this notion that nothing prevents. There's so much preventing people, I think, from coming to Jesus now. So much that we have done to sully this understanding of those who belong to Christ.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the book of Acts,
Yeah.
we're here for a minute, and then we're going to be turning to Galatians in a
Yeah.
couple of weeks. I think that's in June. So that's coming, but we got a little bit more with the book of Acts. And if you're not excited for this Sunday after hearing all that, then rewind the video and watch it again. Join us on Sunday. All the usuals are happening. Open Bible study on site, online. Worship starts, that's at 9:30. Worship starts at 11, special music at 10:30. Join us in the room, online, all the ways and spaces. Virtual coffee hour to talk more afterwards on Zoom. And all sorts of good stuff always happening in the life of the community. Head to the website so you can find which thing you're going to connect with. And we look forward to finding a space for you. What's stopping you from doing this at Riverside? Nothing.
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 Because you belong to Christ.
See you next time.